And thank you all for being here. This grant training is for the 22-23 Rotary year. As you know, we get ready a whole year in advance. Greg, if you'll move on. And then so we're going to talk a little bit about, because we have so many people, I want you to be sure and stay muted. I don't know if you've ever been on Zooms where the dog is barking or doorbells are ringing, and people just don't realize their sound is still on. And stay muted unless we call on you to speak. If you would leave your camera on, that would be great. It will help you interact more with the presentation. And again, because we're up to over, oh gosh, it looks like we're at 80 now. Because we have so many people, we'd like you to ask your questions in chat. We will be watching the chat feature. And when we take breaks for questions, we will catch up on the questions then. So I appreciate your understanding on that. Greg, if you'll go ahead.
Yeah, I'm ready. You ready for the poll?
I am. So we're going to have a poll, just to get a feel for what our audience is like today. There are actually 3 questions. So you will need to scroll down on your poll. You can choose, each of these has 1 answer each. So if you would answer all 3 questions and then hit submit. Greg, if you'll keep an eye on the numbers as they come in.
Yep. We're about 60% now.
Wow.
I'm not getting anything. I've got a screen that says, and the answer is, I don't know what you're doing.
Oh, okay. Let me stop the share. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm getting, it will not submit. It will not submit.
Well, a lot of people have submitted already, 87%.
Yeah, but my button is blank.
Okay, well, 70 out of 80 have.
Okay.
What am I supposed to do?
Well, you just won't vote, that's all.
Be thinking about your answer, Jim, and then you can compare them to the ones that the other people have.
I haven't seen the question.
You haven't seen the question?
Well,
you don't see the questions now?
There's no question. It just says the answer is. That's all I've got.
Well, I've taken the slides down. We're not sharing the screen anymore.
Well, no, I know. That's what I saw. I'm sorry.
Okay, do you see it now?
Nope.
The questions will be showing up as we look at the results. So hopefully you'll be able to see them then, Jim.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg, with the results. Okay, how many times have you attended grant certification training? We had most people who have come 1 to 3 times, and we probably should have had a no for that choice, and I didn't think about it, so I apologize. We have for 4 to 5 times, about close to 20%, and then we have another 20% that are sitting at 4 or more times. So we have lots of people who are fairly new, and then we also have lots of people who have come several times. So that's great. It's nice to see such a good mix in the audience. Question 2 is, has your club ever completed a district and/or a global grant? About 5% of you say neither. And there are a little over 40% who say district grant only. Nobody picked global grant only, which makes sense. Most people get their feet wet with district grants and then move on to global grants. And golly, we have almost exactly half of the people who are in clubs who've done both. Congratulations. Then question 3, if your club has completed a district or global grant, how many have you done? And we had about 17% that said 1, 10% 2. Interestingly enough, we had over 40% that have done 3 or more, And then about a third of you don't exactly know how many. So again, a wide variety of responses. Greg, you can go ahead and close it if my close didn't work, and pull the PowerPoint back up, please. It's good to know the kind of Rotarians that we have in our audience tonight, and I know it will help our presenters. Okay. So we have goals for you tonight. We want you to understand the basics of district grant writing and implementation and evaluation, and the timeline that you'll be asked to follow. We want you to understand how you can be successful in managing a district grant. And we do have stewardship expectations, because just like with your own money, the Rotary Foundation expects us to manage our money well. And also to know how to complete the memorandum of understanding, which you do have to turn in before you can, or at the same time, or before you turn in your district grant application. And the end result of all that paperwork is that we will qualify your club to receive Rotary Foundation grant funds and to participate in either district or global grants. Go ahead, Greg. So you have a star-studded line of presenters today. I'm doing the overview, and then David Carroll, our district grants chair, will be talking to you specifically about the club qualification process. And Linda Schultz is helping us with our paperwork this year, and she may have some things to chime in there as well. Beth Stubbs, our past Rotary Foundation district chair, and also and what we call an assistant regional Rotary Foundation coordinator for our zone, will be talking to us about creating a project. And then we have 3 very experienced people to talk to us about applying for grant and project implementation: Pat White, Rachel Killebrew, and again, Linda Schultz. So I think you're really going to enjoy this presentation. You're going to have lots of different people speaking with you. It's going to be fast-paced, and there'll be time for questions. Greg? So again, I'm going to lead with the overview. It's just going to be a very quick overview of the things that are to come. So hopefully you have already identified a project that you're interested in completing next Rotary year. So you would identify the project this year, and up through July, the person who would have been the president-elect and is now the president for this year, and the president for next year probably are working together to try to figure that out. Then you'll want to be qualified, because you can't submit a grant application unless you have 2 members who attend training. You also have to fill out 2 different documents: the club memorandum of understanding and the club qualification plan. You can submit them tomorrow if you want to, or you can submit them as late as when you turn your application in and turn them in together. We'll start accepting, again, applications tomorrow, and the deadline for those is January 31st of 2022. Now, I say deadline, but it's not a hard and fast deadline. If we still have money left when we go through all the grant applications and approve them, it's going to be very possible for someone to submit an application after that and still have their grant funded. And you'll hear more about that in a little bit. So beginning February 1st, we could review and approve an application. And we want to have them all into the Rotary Foundation sometime in March or April of 2022. What happens is David and I sit down and we fill out a great big long form, and we put in all the clubs and what your grant's about and how much money that we're going to match for your budget. Then we have to turn that into the Rotary Foundation, and they look at that, and then they have to approve that bundle of grants before anything else can happen. So if you'll go on, Greg. So we've never had one turned down. but we're always very careful. So the Rotary Foundation will approve it. And at that point, we will send you an email to whoever your 2 people are on your application that sign and say, guess what? You can begin. We'll give you your grant number, and we will hope that that will happen in May of 2022. Then you carry out your project, and you do a progress report. It's supposed to be midway and no later than October 1st. One of the reasons we ask for that is so that we know if projects aren't actually going to work out for you, and we can award that money elsewhere. Plus, if we see things that we can help you with, it's a great time for us to offer advice or help as you need it. Your final report we would love to have by May the 31st of 2023, and part of that will be receipts. And again, you'll learn more about that later in this presentation. Sometimes things happen, like COVID gets in the way, and it will take a little bit longer than May the 31st. So this year we have accepted final reports after that date and worked with clubs to get them in. We are flexible. We want you to be able to spend your money. And once we approve that final report, you will get your funds. Greg?
Hello.
Okay. The district grants have to be humanitarian. Now, if you file a global grant, you have to do something in one of the 7 areas of focus, and we'll look at those in the next slide. But you have more leeway with the district. You have to specifically fall in one of those areas of focus, but it does have to be a humanitarian grant. You could do it locally, or you could do it internationally. I see my internet connection is unstable. I hope you heard that. So local or international, most people don't realize a district grant could be international. And district grants are funded by donations that our Rotarians in this district give 3 years prior to the annual fund. So for the 22-23 year that we're talking about, the donations from the 1920 Rotary year will fund those grants. Greg, was that your year as district governor?
Yes.
I thought so. Okay, let's move on. And here are those 7 areas of focus. Things like peace, water and sanitation, education and literacy, disease prevention and treatment, maternal and child health, community and economic development. And I forgot to change this slide, I see, but environment was added beginning July the 1st of 2021. So it is in effect now. Go ahead, Greg. So I told you a little bit about 3 years after those annual fund donations come in, that's when we get the money back. And sometimes people want to know a bit more about how that works. So whatever amount that was given 3 years before is divided into 2 pots of money. 50% of that money is district controlled, and 50% of that money is controlled by the trustees of the Rotary Foundation. They call that the share program. And out of our 50% that we directly control, we get money that goes into the district designated fund. And of that amount, we can spend 50% of those dollars for district grants. And that's the maximum, but we always do 50%. So basically, when we look at whatever's given 3 years before, it winds up being a fourth. But let's look at what happens with that other 50% that's trustee controlled. It goes into something called the World Fund, and it's used for global grants. And what happens is if we file a global grant application, then the club money, the district money get matched by the World Fund. And so that money will still come back to the district. There's some other money that goes into global grant funds. There's donor advised funds where people set up their own sort of like something that they want to go to a particular function and they choose annual fund for that. It could also be endowments where people leave part of their estate as a particular endowment to Rotary And that goes into global grants too. So that's the general overview of it. The next slide shows us the specifics for the year that we're talking about. So the 22-23 funding during Greg's year as governor in 1920, our district Rotarians so generously gave over $565,000 to the Rotary Fund. Isn't that amazing? And half of that came back to the district, which worked out to be $282,761. And half of that went directly into our district grants pot, which will be $141,381. Then the other half goes over to match the World Fund money for global grants. And the trustees decide which grants are funded, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if any of you are going to be on the global grant Zoom on Thursday night, you'll discover that it's not that hard to get a global grant. There are just steps you have to follow. And one of the really nice advantages of global grants is that you leverage your money even further. But there are some caveats to global grants that we don't have for district grants. So there's a place for both. Greg? Okay. Remember I told you we were going to talk about grant management, and this is the time for that. So again, think of your own money and how if you give that to someone to invest or use, that you want to be sure that they handle it properly and you know that it's safe and that everything is going on to take care of that money. So part of what we ask you to do with grants is to make sure that you have financial controls in place. Beth should really be doing this part since she's CPA, but she lets me do it. And of course, we mentioned the humanitarians focus earlier. You need to know that it will meet the needs of your beneficiaries, that it fulfills its objectives based on a community assessment. It's not enough for you to think you know what your community needs. What you really need to do is get out and ask them. And that we make sure that those donor funds are handled properly and we safeguard them. Greg? So let's talk a little bit about that safeguarding and stewardship. Part of that is that Rotarians have to be directly involved and supervise the project. You cannot write a grant for a certain amount of money and give it to a community organization and have no involvement. That won't work. We won't approve it. You also have to be sure that you use regular old standard business practices of accounting and safeguarding. Anytime there is an irregularity, we have to report it to the Rotary Foundation. So you would need to report it to us. We approved a particular project and we want the projects to be implemented as we approved it. However, if you see that things need to be changed in your project, that's okay. Just ask us. We can approve the changes, but just make sure we know in advance about any changes and we do approve them. That somebody reviews those financial records. It's not just one person that has control over the money in your club. And we really need you to support turn in your reports in a timely fashion. That's especially true for the final report because we can't get the money for the next year until all the final reports are in and we do our closing report with the Rotary Foundation. So if we hold up the it'll hold up the whole process for every club in the district if you're way late. So just be careful about that. Greg? Now let's talk a little bit about how qualification works. You do have to attend one of our grant management seminars yearly. Part of the reason for that is that things change. Another reason is that we really want your current leadership involved in the training so that they understand the things that are going on. And again, this will be discussed a little bit more later. The club itself is responsible for using the funds. Particular people may be carrying out the club's orders, so to speak, but it is the club itself that is responsible. Potential conflicts of interest have to be disclosed, and it's very rare that there might not be a conflict of interest. It's okay if there is, like if you're doing a project with Habitat for Humanity and your brother-in-law is the head of Habitat for Humanity for your community, just put it down. It's not a big deal. We just have to know about it. And sometimes the Rotary Foundation does ask to audit us. And so if we need paperwork or that kind of thing, we would like for you to cooperate with us and provide that in a timely fashion. And of course, again, with the stewardship, use the money the way it was intended. Now, I believe it's time for David to take over. Thank you for
Yes.
your attention, all of you.
Thank you, Debbie. Debbie, can you hear me okay? Okay. So Debbie went over some of the requirements. And I think that what we want to do is get into some particulars. And Linda Schultz came on board last year and has done a wonderful job. And we submit those to Linda. She helps us review those. And then she and Leanne Cordell will put your name on the list and we will approve you. And we keep these lists. And if we're ever asked by the Rotary Foundation, then we want to make sure that we have your club approved. Attendance at the seminar is just, we asked for 2 club members to be part of it. And, I would really like for us to encourage having more people involved, not the same people that come every year. I think we need to get more people involved. And I know in my club, I think I've got 5 or 6 from Cleveland because we kind of submitted it out and submitted it to all the club members again and encouraged them to get on. You learn something. You might find out that you might have more club members that want to be involved in grants. But anyway, we want at least 2 people to be part of that. And also, it kind of helps build up your bank of people that are involved. So if one person drops out of the club or is not able to attend the next year, you already have people that have been part of that group. So 2 club members is what we asked for. There's 2 documents and they're online, and you'll find out that they're on one area. So you don't have to go to 2 different areas to fill out the memorandum of understanding and the club qualification plan. We put them together, even though they take separate signatures and everything, we put them together. The MOU is the Rotary Foundation's way to say you've agreed on how to spend money that has been donated by Rotarians. We work hard to raise money, and we want to make sure that it's spent correctly, and they set out guidelines so we understand and we agree of how the money is to be spent. So you fill these out, you understand them, and then you complete them. The club qualification plan is more on the club level. Do you have a separate checking account? Do you have a committee of so many people to work on this? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Greg?
David, before you go on, I do want to mention, gosh, now I've forgotten because of the slide before. But also David Chafin had a great point in the chat about people who are on their phones. So David, would you just share that with everyone? I don't have my reading glasses and I want to be sure I get it right.
For everybody to put it be on mute so we don't have any back noise. Is that what you want me to ask, Debbie? Yeah, so please, everyone.
No, I was going to let David tell us. David Chafin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were telling me. Okay.
Yes, if you're on telephone and you haven't figured out how to mute, hit *6 and it's toggle back and forth, mute and unmute.
Okay, well, I've learned something too, so I didn't know that. Okay, so everybody heard that.
And I do remember,
Thank you, David.
I remember the other thing. The forms are up on the website already. Greg got them up early. Okay, now I'm done. Thank you.
Seems like with Greg's help and Debbie and Bobby, we have started keeping, we get those up a lot faster now. So thank you for going ahead and having those online. So they're ready to fill out when you're ready. Okay, so the club re-qualification. Every club that's going to do a district or a global grant must be qualified every year. We hear this every year because people will say, well, we qualified last year. Well, that's great, but that was for last year's grants. So for this year, if you're going to submit an application, you need to be re-qualified. Your club does. So I would suggest make sure that and most clubs already do this if they're used to doing it every year. Review last year's qualification plan. Find out who has it, get it out. And did you understand what was written? Did you do what you wrote last year? And what could you do to improve the information that you put down this year? Maybe last year was your first one to fill out. You know more about it. You've already worked through a grant and you understand the qualification process and why it's important. So you modify it and you resubmit your qualification plan to Linda. And it's kind of like we start all over again, like we do with an application for a grant. We read through those, make sure that everybody understands. We want to make sure you understand what you've signed. So you sign a new memorandum of understanding every year and your club is qualified. Okay, next slide. So maintaining your qualification. You want to make sure that you understand so many things in here that you have to make sure that you maintain. Some of the things like Debbie had mentioned are conflicts of interest. It could be that when you first started this, you maybe didn't feel like you had a conflict of interest, but maybe as you move through your project and you find a project, you realize it, so you would update it. You would make sure that we had it and we will approve it and put it with maybe the one you submitted earlier. So just because it's been approved, it could change. And if it changes, you need to let us know. Who in the world would you put in charge of to manage your qualification, your club qualification? I would hope that it would be someone that is familiar with projects, that it would be someone that we could contact or you could contact that would understand what was done. And, you know, when you're looking, we can talk a little bit about this in a minute, but who would you get to do it in your club? Someone that has got great attendance, maybe someone that already has a responsibility. And the first person that comes to my mind would probably be a club treasurer. But that would be up to you. But somebody that's stable in the club that is involved in the projects. Okay, Greg? There's so many things, if you've been working on local projects anyway, even without grants, a lot of the requirements you're probably already implementing. And that's something that I think that you'd want to look and say, hey, look, we're already doing all this anyway. And maybe you aren't, and you could improve on that. What requirements does your club need to implement? So use this as an example, and it could be that there's projects that you're doing already that you need to improve on. So I think that you can use this as a base for all your projects and not just for grant projects. We've already talked about what type of club members would be good choices to help implement the club MOU. And like I said, I think it would be people that are familiar with your club, familiar with your projects. And we talk about different people, the club qualification plan, the best practices and issues. The one thing I want to really, when you choose your manager, you make sure that you don't have any conflicts of interest. And I'll use an example that my own club, a few years, we do a lot of projects with the Boys and Girls Club. And so the director of the Boys and Girls Club is a member of our club. Well, is it okay for us to meet with him and us come up with ideas? But when it really comes to the money part and the actual financial, writing checks, paying bills, all that needs to be disclosed and that needs to be at arm's length. So can they be involved in the project? Yes, but you have to be very careful. We all serve on boards of organizations. Just make sure that you're not part of some of the final decision making and persuasion. You know, you can get caught in a lot of different conflicts of interest and you have to be really careful. Training, be sure that you train, come to training, and that's what we're doing now. And train your members and the people on the committee. Let them go over and train them on what we need to be doing. Bank accounts, that is so important because there is a great requirement for global grants. Global grants need a different bank account, a separate bank account for each global grant. We've discussed this several times, and if you're doing district projects, you know, I think it's good to have a grant account by itself. And that way you kind of keep some money in that account, and it keeps it separate from your club funds, because you don't want to commingle your club funds and your actual operating expenses for your club. You don't want to mix those with the grant funds. You need to keep those separate. Financial management plan. Come up with a plan on how to manage the funds. I would suggest definitely 2 signatures on checks. It really helps accountability, and it takes the stress off of the one person that signs the checks. I like 2 signatures. Document retention. The Rotary Foundation has the right to come in and audit our books anytime they want to, but we have to keep all of our paperwork for 5 years. So we keep hard copies and we keep electronic copies of all the applications and the qualification paperwork. But if we happen to come back and we need something from your club, we want to make sure that you keep those documents as much as we do. You find one person or an area to keep those documents in, and make sure that maybe if you're doing them electronically, that maybe more than one person keeps those or has a copy of them. And be careful about those, because you need to have a good way of document retention, because more than likely one day we will be audited, and I think we'll do a great job of it, but we want to make sure we do that. Reports, it's all the same. Make sure that you keep the document retention, the good reports, and a misuse plan. If something happens in your club and you feel like that there is some, you need to come up with a plan. If you see something that's not right, that's going on with your project, you need to have a way of dealing with that in the club. And then you need to have a way of discussing that with us on the district level. And we want to make sure that we help you with that. And then after you go through all the reports and the documentation, you understand what you're signing, then the president-elect and the current president and the president for the upcoming year will be signing the documents, and they both agree, since we have staggering years, that the Rotary year staggers the calendar year, that they want to make sure that both presidents understand that, and then you submit that, and we will approve that or ask you for more questions. Greg? This is when I would like to ask Linda, give her a few minutes, and let her talk about some of the things that have happened this year that we think would help you to improve on your paperwork for qualification. Linda?
Yes, David. I would like to point out that the forms that are on the website, you can download them, and then you can fill them out on the computer. And it really helps us to have them filled out on the computer, because it's a lot easier to read a computer form than a handwritten form sometimes. But I can't stress it. There's 7 pages. And the nice thing about it is the MOU and the club qualification are in those 7 pages. And so it really makes it easy. It's all together. But the memorandum of understanding, you need to make sure that you really read that carefully and understand it, because it will help you fill out the club qualification forms. So that is something that I think really helped me when I filled out some of these forms. Also, you're going to have to get with your treasurer and get some information from him on what you have contributed to the foundation. And so you'll have to be contacting him. Also, if the form is filled out on computer, You do not have to have the president, the club president and club for the those 2 years. You don't have to have them to sign anything, which is nice. One of the things that when I was reviewing things that I came across was on the club qualification form, which is pages 4 through 7, that some of the questions, like David has alluded to this about the potential conflicts of interest. People say, we have no conflicts of interest, you know. Well, that's not what the question's asking. It's asking for potential things. And you need to know that if something does happen, that you need to contact the district immediately and let the district know about it. I was trying to go through here and trying to figure out the different things that I had to send back emails to people and ask them to complete. The financial management plan, that is something that people really need to give a lot of thought to and answer completely. And the document retention, I know I had one that was sent to me, and it said that, you know, our member keeps his records in his office and he keeps them under lock and key. Well, that's all well and good that he does that. That's great. There's only one little form or problem. No one else has access to those, most likely. And, you know, to make just a thumb drive or something like that, you know, of all this information, and give it to the president or treasurer or someone else, so they will have it. And, you know, that information is available to us. These are some of the, you know, biggest problems that I have seen with the forms that I've you know, reviewed. David?
And, you know, Linda, one thing that I would like to add on to that is that, you know, just because you might not have a project right now, but I would go ahead and at least get your qualification paperwork in, especially if you've already gone through the training. That way, if your club comes up with a project through the year, you've already done this part on it. And if not, we'll have to get you to go ahead and go back and familiarize yourself again with what you should have filled out earlier. And it would just be nice to go ahead and for every club, if you're participating in this training, to go ahead and get your club qualified. That way, even if you don't have a project right now, but you might have one come up within the year, then you'll already have that qualification out of the way.
One of the things I'd like to add to that, David, is that if you have a multi-club district grant, the club that is the one that is initiating it is the one that will have to fill out the MOU and the club qualification forms. So the other clubs, I may be wrong on that, David. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah,
okay. It's just the application.
That's the application. Yeah, right.
Okay.
All the clubs will need to be qualified if they're participating. And that's a good question, though. All the clubs will need to, if you're participating and you're down as a participating club, you will need to be qualified.
Thank you.
I'm glad you brought that up, though.
Hey, Dave, there's one question in the chat. It says, can you partner with a club in Nigeria to apply for a global grant?
You can, and if you're working with other clubs, even if there's an international club, they have to qualify just like every club has to qualify. But you can that would be on a global grant. I think that's what that's what I saw. That would be a global grant. And
yes.
If you have a chance, I would really like for you to key into or see Jim's program on Thursday, and he'll go over exactly what the two clubs have to do to be able to do one grant together. Now, if you're working on a district grant, you don't have to have both clubs. You can your club can just be. You could work with another club in another country, but you would only need your qualification and your paperwork. Application for a district grant. I hope that helps out a little bit. And, you know, as you're filling some of this paperwork out, if you've got problems, don't hesitate to send us a message or call us, or we'll be glad to help you. It's supposed to be fairly simple to do, and I don't want you to feel like it's too much of a burden to fill out this paperwork, because it's pretty straightforward. Any other questions? I think there was a question on where to find the forms, and I saw Greg had put that up. They're on the District 6780 website. Anything else?
No, there's nothing else. And yeah, Kate Bolin also put up the link, so
Okay.
shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Beth Stubbs here, and we're going to talk in this section of the training about creating a project. Next slide, please. So these are our objectives, and hopefully we'll meet them. Identify best practices for choosing a project. We'll go over some of those. Develop a plan to implement your project, and understand what is needed to establish a financial management plan. So next slide. What's really, really important about having a good grant project, a successful grant project, is for it to be well planned and well organized. So the first thing you want to understand is it the right project? Because meeting the community's needs is of the utmost importance. Not really what we want to do as a project. Maybe we think it's easy to dig a well and we'll go dig a well for somebody. But if that's not what they need, if they really need something else, sanitation or something, it's very, very important to determine what the community needs. And if we're going to have partners in our grant, then we need to have communication. And some of you mentioned a grant in an international stage, and that communication is really important when you're talking about another country. You've got time zones, you've got internet issues, you have phones that don't work correctly. So what is your plan for communication if you do international projects? And what is your plan for communication if you have community partners as well? And implementation plans with measurable goals and outcomes. Rotary has really emphasized in recent years us being able to measure the impact that we have. And so to do that, we have to have something in place by which to measure and then say what our outcomes were from the effort that we made. And are our projects sustainable beyond the life of the grant? You know, we don't want to just complete a project, give somebody the key and walk away and not know whether it will be properly maintained. I remember a project where they wanted to install water fountains in a park. And so the question became, who owned the park? Who would maintain the water fountains? And so it's very, very important to see how this project will live beyond the Rotary year, the life of the project. And practicing proper stewardship of grant funds is very important. We want all our Rotarians who give their precious money to know that we are taking good care of it. And so it's up to all of us to do that, to be good stewards of our grant funds, because they've given it to us and trusted us to treat it well. Next slide. So how do I assess whether I'm doing the right thing in my community? Well, you could talk with partners and members of the community. You could assess your club's resources and availability and its potential partners to meet the need. And you could choose a project that's based on what the community needs, not what you want to do. So what do you think assess your club's resources and availability? What do you think that means? You know, Rotary was started on having these different vocations so that we would know that we would have all this talent to harness. So when you think about a project, look at your club members. What can they bring to the project? And maybe you want them to be a central person in that. Next slide, please. So how can partners help your project be more successful? Well, lots of ways. You know, you can involve your interactors and you can teach them about community service. You can involve your Rotaractors if you have a Rotaract club nearby and help them learn about community service, or you're just giving great vision about what Rotary is doing. So how do I do that? How do you go about identifying your potential partners? Well, there are lots of ways, but mainly it requires you thinking about what this project really needs to be and who needs to be involved. There can be other nonprofits. I saw Tony Gibbons on here. It could be a habitat project. There are lots of organizations that you can partner with. Almost all of us are partnering with a school system when we do the dictionary project. They are a partner. And we're partnering with all sorts of municipal entities when we do a project in our local communities. Our club just did a Wi-Fi, we call it Sky-Fi project in Blount County, and we partnered with the Blount County Library, the city of Alcoa, and the city of Maryville. And so we had lots of partners there. Next slide, please. So, and when you're doing your planning, I really recommend that you don't try to have one person in charge of your grant committee. Because as you know, in Rotary, people get new jobs, they get to go up in stature, they leave your club, not because you weren't doing Rotary well, but because we are leaders in the community and we're leaders at work. And sometimes people leave our club. So if the person who was handling the committee for the grant project is gone now, we're in big trouble. So it's important that you have at least 3 people in your committee and you think about what their roles can be. Maybe their roles can be finances, maybe they can look at the timeline, maybe they will report out to the club, maybe they will organize the estimates and do all sorts of things, fill out the paperwork, write the grant. They can have a number of roles. It's good to set measurable and sustainable goals. And I think as you go through the grant writing, you will see what you need to do there. And then, believe it or not, almost the last thing you need to do is create a budget. Because once you get your project in mind, what you want it to be, who it involves, you made an assessment, you determined what it needed to be, and you got your committee together and you developed a timeline and you developed everything about the project, then you say, this project is wonderful and we need X amount of dollars. We need to find out how much money we need and create a budget. And at that time, then you start determining, do I have enough budget? Do I need to have a fundraiser? There can be a lot of time that needs to go into when you finally have to spend the money. So creating an implementation plan is very, very important, and having a contingency plan is important too, because things can go wrong. We saw that during COVID, lots of things can go wrong, and many of our clubs had to work harder to complete their projects than ever before. So having a contingency plan, maybe a contingency fund, and you have to be flexible. We have to adapt. We have to be ready to go. Next slide.
Yeah, Beth, we got one question in here from
Okay.
Dr. Ahmed from Cookville.
Yes.
And his question is probably not a simple answer. His question is helping in establishing shelter for homeless in our community a legitimate project?
Say that again. Say it one more time.
Okay, helping establish a shelter for homeless in our community a legitimate project?
Yes, but I mean, there are lots of pieces to that. So I know that one of the projects we had a few years ago involved a woman's shelter, and they provided furniture and all the things that went inside the shelter. Now, not to build a building. We wouldn't want you to build a building for a shelter. But there are certainly things you can do inside that to assist with getting a shelter up and running. I hope that answers the question, Greg. And I think I might be out of time. Do I have any time, Debbie? Next slide, please. Oh,
Keep going,
got it.
Beth. We're
Okay.
good.
So creating the budget. So we have to have a budget that's realistic. If you're a club of 20 and you want to do a $50,000 project, that might not be realistic. So do what the size of your group can do. Maybe it's 5,000, maybe it's 2,500, but try not to take on anything that's too much. Always use competitive bidding. If you have if you're buying playground equipment or something of that nature, a lot of times the Rotarian knows someone who sells the equipment and says they'll give you a good deal, but get another bid just to make sure, just to cover your bases. It's not that we don't trust the Rotarian, but sometimes, like David said, we might get audited and they say, okay, did you get any competitive bids? So we need to do that. Make sure your prices are reasonable. You don't want to probably do something that's the most extreme, the most expensive item on the planet. And then disclose potential or real conflicts of interest. They've already talked about that just a little bit. And I sort of mentioned it when I said there might be a Rotarian who says they can get you a deal on something. You know, you can work out of those conflicts of interest by covering your bases in other ways. But always, always be really careful about that. And you can, if you don't know if you have one, ask David. He will tell you if you have a conflict of interest. I think that concludes my slides. So questions. Is a Rotary Club in another country, it went away. Is a Rotary Club in another country, district grant, considered a cooperating organization? Is a letter for cooperation in a financial audit needed? No, I don't think that another Rotary Club is a cooperating organization. That's something that's on the global grant application that you're asking me, right, Alan? You can unmute yourself and we can talk about it a little bit more.
Actually, no, I'm asking about a district grant that we're doing with a club in Zimbabwe. Of course, we've done a global grant with them, and that we know that paperwork's different. I was just reading the checklist, and I just wanted to make sure there wasn't some. We're I want to say sister club. That's not the right language. Twin club. So we already have pretty strong agreements. I just didn't know if that you might want some particular paperwork other than they of course wrote the grant, the proposal and the budget and all of that.
David, you want to add something to that? I don't really know what he's trying to get at. If that's
Well, I mean, I think if I think you need to be careful if you're going to be responsible for the grant and you're going to report it. I think that your club needs to be more involved in the writing of the grant. Now they could help you with the particulars, but it's going to have to be with your club's signature and your club's, you're going on your qualification on that. So I think definitely, but as far as on a district grant, I think you need to put on there that the other club is involved, or maybe they're helping you in some way and the body of the grant some way, but I don't know that they would be a cooperating organization. I don't think they would. You, Beth?
No,
another
I don't think
Rotary
so.
Club?
Okay, I didn't think so either. I just wanted to be sure, and I guess I probably misspoke. I'm writing the grant, but
Okay.
they wrote the project specs and
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that would be fine, because as long as you wrote the grant and everything, are they going to be getting any funds from their district for the project?
No, not on this one.
Okay. If they were, then they would have to be qualified and
Right.
just like you would. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Anybody else? I flew through there.
Don't see anything, Beth.
Okay, great.
Okay, we're going to give you a minute or, well, more than a minute to talk with each other in breakout sessions. Greg, I'm thinking 5 or 6 per group.
Yeah, I've got everything ready. I got 6 in a group and
Okay, perfect. If you'll go on to the next slide, then I'll give them their question. Basically, what you want to do is talk to each other about the most important thing you've learned so far. And if you have time, questions that you still have so that we can address those when you come back. You'll have 10 minutes for this. So Greg, send them to their breakout rooms. The most important thing you've learned so far and any questions you have left about the things that we've already talked about.
so Deb, I don't have you, Beth, David, Cindy. I don't have them. I don't have you all going to rooms right now. So
Okay, that's good. We can just talk to each other. How's that sound?
yeah, I'm going to
We can have a party.
Yeah. Bob went to our Rotary Club meeting.
And it was delicious.
how do we want to handle the chat stuff? Are you going to read that, Debbie?
If I could see better, I would. I think we should let you read it, Greg.
Okay, I can read. Well, you assume I can read.
I'll do the instructions. Yes. Wait till we get everybody back.
These smiling faces.
Yeah, if everybody would mute themselves again, please.
And then Greg, if you'll pull that PowerPoint page back up.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
People are so rapidly coming back. I will announce that we had 91 people at the beginning when everyone got signed in. So that's an amazing number for district grants training.
All right,
We appreciate all of you being here.
Debbie, hang on. I'm going to mute everybody. So you're going to have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, we're still missing 4, but I will go ahead and start back. They may have had to leave us. So you were to discuss in your breakout group what the most important thing was that you've learned so far in this training. And then if you had time, you were going to talk about questions you might still have about what's come up to this point. So if you will share those ideas in chat, and I see that Amanda DeBoard has already asked us a question. What is the dollar limit per district grant? David?
We have on the application that we suggest that $5,000 be the kind of the limit, but it's just a suggestion. If you have a larger project and you want to let us know a little ahead of time, and we have funds after we go ahead and review, after the first group of grants, the first deadline is the 31st. If we have more funds after that, we'll be glad to look at larger grants, but we could only kind of start out with, we want to make sure everybody can participate. But let me just give you one example. We have Jim, the Chattanooga Breakfast, and there might be someone on from Chattanooga Breakfast, I'm sure there is, but they asked for $25,000 to help with their playground. And we were only able to give them part of that to begin with. Then as the year went on, certain projects didn't happen and we didn't have any more applications, and we were able to fund more of that project. And that's what happens with district grants. So don't be afraid to ask for more money. You might not get it on the first round, but we might be able to fund it as the year goes on. If you might even suggest to maybe do it in stages, but we'll be glad to work with you on that. But $5,000 is what we've talked about, but you can ask for more. You might just not get it.
The
Okay.
ideas are coming in fast and furious too. Ben Craig says Structure to the grant process, hearing the overall process, stewardship built into the process, and many projects will need multiple people involved.
That's exactly right.
Catherine Rose says, do your paperwork. Megan Belcher, I'm brand new to grants, so this is all new and exciting for me. Welcome, Megan. We're glad you're excited. Ricky White, I believe that's Ricky White, says it would be great if the district can provide a list of past district projects. Actually, Ricky, there is a list up on the district website, and we will be updating that in the next few days. So there are some projects already up, and we'll be putting more up. And then Pat White said that our group of 4 appreciated knowing where to find the forms and have them to review. The importance of taking responsibility seriously for funds appropriated, the need for more member involvement, and the importance of best practices. And then Alan from Knoxville says, I forgot that this is a reimbursed model and we have to cash flow it first. Great things that you picked up from the preceding discussion. Would anybody else like to add anything before we move on? There's Dawn. Dawn says our group discussed potential partnerships, local government, nonprofits, etc. Emphasis on knowing your community and who might be a good partner with projects. Norm said MOU and COP every year, conflict of interest, money from 3 years ago. And Dr. Ahmed said, would you be so kind to provide the recording for the session? Thanks. Ahmed, we will actually have this up on the district website within the next week or so. So it will be there all the rest of the year, just the way we did the one last year. Thank you for the question. All right, this is the point where we turn you over to Rachel and Linda and Pat White. Pat, take it away.
Okay, thank you. And good evening again, everyone. I hope you're all excited about applying for a district grant this year and have something in mind. If you don't, you need to talk to your members and try to get them excited about finding things in the community that you can do a project on. And as Beth stated, it doesn't have to be a large project. Okay, and next slide. Well, we're just going to go over briefly. I hope you have the forms in front of you. A successful grant is just one that has as many details as you can put in without being cumbersome when you write them, and understanding good stewardship practices. Next slide. Okay, the best thing to do, like some people don't like to do, is read the instructions first and look at your timeline and the checklist. Make sure that you have the club qualification and the MOU submitted. Okay, first of all, if you're going to have a single club application, make sure that you have the correct form that you've pulled up. I know I had one so far that pulled up a global grant form for a district grant form. So it is the district grant application that you're looking for. And I've said this every time I have the opportunity. I think grants are the heart of Rotary that really puts our purpose out into the community. And we need to publicize it as much as we can. And I hope that those of you that are attending are going to be the ones responsible for implementing the application. If not, I would highly recommend that those that are going to be involved take advantage of the training that will be, the video that will be online. When do you apply? You can start now, and the deadline will be January 31st of next year. And I had the question asked, how much is available? And David answered that question. There's really no minimum or maximum. Most of them go from 500 up to 25,000. I would say the average is probably around 5,000. And if we have the funds, we would love to give you as much as we can. District grants are normally limited to one to a club, but exceptions are made depending on how much money is left to be allocated. Multiple club application. If your club does not have enough funds to do a project yourself, I would suggest getting another club or several clubs involved. And that way you can pull your funds and do the multi-club application. And make sure that the primary club is the one that does the communicating. That's very important because it gets confusing when we have the other clubs communicating when it's not the primary club. And then there's the district grant progress report, which is due October 1st of each year. And then the final report. And that is due hopefully before May 31st, but at the latest May 31st. And that is so that we get all of the projects in and we get our funds for the following year. Okay, next slide. As I said, the first one is the primary club, the sponsor, and your requested funds. How much is it going to take? How much are you going to ask of the district? And the matching funds must exceed or match the requested funds. And when you're doing multi-club, it's important that the match only is for those clubs that are actually participating. It has to be a club that gets the matching fund. It can't be another organization that gets a matching fund. Okay, in the project description, it's just basically telling your story, telling your project. What are you going to call it? Make it something simple. And what need is it going to fill? And what are the goals? What do you hope to achieve? And how are you going to measure the objectives? Okay, next slide. Where is this going to take place? And what need is it going to fill? In other words, are you going to have build beds for a children's home or something of that nature? And how many is it going to benefit? And what is the expected impact that it's going to make? Then the next is the action plan. Who's going to do what? And when are you going to do it? And what are the outcomes going to be? And what is the impact it's going to have? And the next important one is the financial control. Beth has talked about that. And it's very important that you have someone, preferably the treasurer in your own club, that will take responsibility and to set up good controls so that you have a good audit trail. And is the project going to be sustainable? In other words, if you put in, as Beth said earlier, a well or something of that nature, who's going to maintain it? Are you going to have to do something every year in order to maintain it? Or is someone else going to have the responsibility for doing that? Okay, next slide. And follow the timeline. As you said, it has to be complete. It cannot start until you have received your identification number. And that is after we have submitted all of the projects for the year to RI, have them approved. And then once that gets back to us for the approval, I will send out an email to everyone giving them their project number. And it's important to have that number on each of the forms that you submit. That way there's no confusion over which project is involved, because some clubs do have more than one project going at the same time. And is there going to be any non-financial Rotarian involvement? And I think that's really important. Sometimes it's more important to have the involvement of the Rotarians than it is the actual money, because they see that you're really committed to the project, and it becomes, you take ownership of it, and the recipient appreciates that. And publicity is very important. You know, it's been said many times, Rotary is one of the best kept secrets. We need to get our name out there. Anything that we do, we have to try to attach our name to it in some way. Get your local newspapers involved, your radio stations. If you have a TV station that's responsive, you can get them involved as well. And responsible Rotarians. And that is important. It's important because we need to know who is going to be the contact. Make sure that the information that you have for them is correct when we're sending emails, or if we have to make a phone call.
Pat, you muted yourself.
Okay. I'm not sure where you left off. Responsible Rotarians?
Right, that's where you were, Pat.
Okay, thank you. Okay. It's important that you have two people from your club so that you both know what's going on, although the information will be sent to the primary. And here again, it gets confusing when information is sent to the primary and then someone else comes back with questions and it's not from the primary person. So sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So it's really important to have that information to and from the primary contact. And are you going to have any cooperating organizations? And it can be the school, it can be 4-H club, it could be the Boys and Girls Club. We need letters of cooperation if you do have any organization. All they need to do is to write a short paragraph stating what the involvement is and have it signed and dated so that we can keep it in our files in case there's ever any question. Now, when it comes down to the budget, it has to be detailed and itemized. And there is a sample. I believe it's included in your packet. And if you keep an ongoing record, an Excel sheet, it's much easier to do at the time that you're doing it than it is to wait until the very end and go back and have to try to put all the things together. So match your expenses, put it in the correct category and the total, and then those totals have to match the total that you've requested on the front part of the form and the other section in part 2. And then the certification, we need to have that signed by the president or the president-elect and dated, and submit it to David and myself. We like to have both copies in case one or the other of us doesn't happen to receive it for some reason. Okay, next slide. Here's a sample of the budget that I was referring to. Just a simple Excel sheet. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but make your categories and then match your totals. Okay, next slide. And go over your checklist. It isn't really necessary for you to include the checklist when you return your application, but this is for your own use. You know, go over the questions, have someone else go over your application to make sure that everything has been answered the way it should, whether you're qualified, and if the timelines are matching, and if you've described how the needs will be helped in the community, and the involvement that your Rotarians are going to have. Okay, next slide. And also, how can the benefits be sustained? We hope that our projects will be of long standing and not just for a short term. Although in case of food and donations of backpacks and things like that, naturally they're going to be consumed in a short period of time. And has a project chair been selected? And have you provided the correct information for them? And as one of our group members pointed out, it's really important to have more than one person involved in your grant process on your committee, because one person, you know, the more the merrier, and you have a lot better input when you have more than just one person. And is your budget detailed and included? Do all the expenses meet the restrictions? Are all the partners listed? Do their contributions match the budget? And is it signed? We have a lot of them that we have to send back because they're not signed. Are letters of support from cooperating partners included? And have you kept copies of everything before you submit them to the district? Okay, next slide. Okay, questions?
Pat, we've got a discussion going on in chat about whether it's possible to do multi-year projects with district grants. I started answering that with that multi-year projects are really for global grants rather than district grants, but with the district grant, you could do successive stages of projects. For example, what Chattanooga Breakfast has done with their playground, or other clubs have done with, say, building wells or latrines in other countries. So it is possible to do in that fashion. And then Jim Goodrich asked a question that, David, if you'll take a look at that, I'd like you to answer
Sure.
that one.
Is this a kind of multi-year project which is broken into annual segments? Should your application reflect the larger scope? I don't see anything wrong with kind of having a plan about the future to let us know on that, but we can only approve 1 year at a time. We couldn't approve something for 3 years because we don't know what the need will be for each year. So I would kind of let those stages stand on their own if at all possible. But that way, I think that, but we'll work with you as much as we can if at all possible, but we can only do 1 year's grant at a time. But like for Chattanooga, and a lot of clubs are doing projects that have different stages to them. So, but we can only, I would break those stages up as much as I could so that those will stand on their own. I hope that answers the question. But if you have a particular project, give me a call, talk to me about it, and we'll try to work it out with you.
Thank you, David. Rachel, do you have anything you'd like to add to what Pat said in this section?
I might just add that don't start filling out the form until you analyzed in different groups, different people's point of view about what you plan on putting in that section, and get all that detail work done separate before you ever start filling out the application. And make sure that everybody's in agreement and you filled in all the details. And then also, of course, it all depends on whether it is a grant that's going to be in another country. That's a lot more complicated, a lot more details. So depending on your grant, make sure that you've got plenty of teams, get plenty of input, do the detail work before you ever approach filling out the application.
There was a question asked about who is in charge of the Chattanooga breakfast. Jim Roxlow would be the person to talk to about that. He knows so much about that project, and I think he would be the person to ask about that. Rachel, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Was there anything else you were going to mention?
No, not unless there's some questions you want me to ask.
There's a couple of things that I noted, and I might answer another question. But I think what Pat said about the contact on the grant application, that really is so important, because when we're needing final reports, you don't know how many times that I have contacted the person and they didn't even know that they were on there as a contact person. So make sure that that person understands that you put down that they're going to be the person we're going to contact to find out, like, are you finished with the grant or whatever? But there's several times, and I don't want to make it like a lot of times, but sometimes I'll call that person, and I have to go through 3 or 4 people to kind of find out who knows anything about the grant. So that's real important that you put the person that knows about the grant on the application. And I'd mentioned this earlier. Sometimes you're working with organizations that have grant writers, like the Boys and Girls Club, the schools and stuff like that. But they can help you with it, but the applications really need to come from the club. And I think that way you know more about the project, but they can help with it, but they just need to, the club needs to write the grant. Is there anything else that I need to answer, or Rachel, or any of us?
Not in chat, David.
I will say for this year, and I will make this, we've done this several times because we want every club to get a grant. So for example, if you submitted an application in January and you had a project that was short, a big short project, it wouldn't take much time, and we had funds available, then we would be glad to try to put it in the present year's grant instead of the future year. We have right now, we don't have any projects for this year, for the 21-22 year. We don't have any in the pipeline or on the waiting list. So if you have a project right now, we'd be willing to try to work it out for this year. If you had something that you already have, and then that way that loosens up money for the year, the next year coming up. But anyway, call me if you've got any questions. I didn't mean to muddy the water with that, but we do have some funds that I think there's always money that will be available in the present year. And we don't have any clubs on the waiting list right now.
David, Allen says you'll be getting his next week.
That's fine. Send me one. Seriously, if you've got a project right now and we can finish it before the end of the year, we'd like to do something. Yeah. All right. Now I've got 2 clubs that have tell me that they're going to submit a project for this year. And I know that my club was one of them. It was about a $4,000 or $5,000 project. We've got about $9,000 right now. So left in funds, but we have nothing else on the waiting list. So I've already had a couple of projects that I think will be coming in the next few days.
Jim Goodrich has a question.
Sure.
Actually, I didn't. I don't know what happened. I didn't push anything.
Oh, it said
Well,
your
if-
hand was raised, so, okay.
If you don't, Jim, if you have something come up, let me know.
No, I'm just fine.
Okay, great. Great.
We're going to go on into the last section of our training. And once again, you're going to get to hear from Rachel and her partners. And this one's going to be on implementation and reporting. Take it away, Pat and Rachel and Linda.
Okay, we're just going to go quickly over this. It's really kind of a repetition, but try to understand how to monitor the progress of your plan, to gain best practices for managing your funds, the importance of evaluating a project and applying the lessons learned, and understanding the reporting requirements. Okay, next slide. Personal contact. And that's really important that you have contact and keep the communication open with the organization or the party that you're helping and that you're writing the grant for. Financial management, as we have all stated, is very important to keep things separate, to keep good records and make sure that more than one person has a copy of it. The thumb drive is the easiest thing to do. It can be passed around very easily and it will hold a lot of information. Keep your records. I know our club has had to move several times, and things get stored in one person's or another garage, and who knows where some things are, but always know where your grant information is being stored. And again, the thumb drive is a real good way of keeping a duplicate set. And follow the original plan, although there can be and often are things that come up. We had one so far this year. They were dealing with another country, and they were not responding. The mayor decided that he didn't want to have anything to do with the project for the particular district, and so they had to go to another district. And so all we did is ask for a change of where it was going to be. It was just simply a matter of location, same number of schools and the same output of funds. Okay, next slide. Ongoing during evaluation. And that is really important too. And make sure that things are going along as they are supposed to be. And that goes hand in hand with the communication. If you don't communicate, you don't know how well the project is going. That goes within the committee as well as the organization that you're working with. And this is based on the goals that you've set for the project. And it assists with reporting requirements, because we do ask on the progress report, what's been done, how many Rotarians have been involved. And here again, it's good to keep a running total as you go, who's helping with the project. Maybe you have someone else that come in and is helping that you didn't identify to begin with. But make sure that you keep track of those people, because we use those figures, and district and RI uses those figures for Rotarian involvement. And if you find some things that haven't gone well and you can think of other ways to do it, write them down so that when you have future projects, you can be more successful and you can promote it better. Next slide. Again, the progress report is due October 1st. And I'm happy to report that over half of the grants that were written for this year, the progress reports have come in. So I'm going to have to do a little nudging for the rest of them, but many of them came in even before October 1st, which was very good. All grants should be completed by March 31st, and that's to give us additional time to get all your receipts, excuse me, all your receipts and all the reporting together so that it is fully completed by May 31st. And we hope it's before then, because the final report has to be approved by the district team before the grants funds will be paid. And you do want to get your money back. On the report section of the progress report, again, it's just a description of your project and how many Rotarians participated and what have they done. If you've only had a meeting to discuss what you're going to do, that's fine. Just write that down. If you haven't had an opportunity to do anything yet, just say nothing yet, but we're planning to do it on such and such a date. And what has been completed, what's left to be done, and are you still on schedule for completion? That's the most important thing, to make sure that it is completed by the deadline. And how many expenses have been paid to date. And of course, you won't receive the funds from the district until it's totally complete. But whether you've received the funds, if you're doing a partnership with other clubs, if you receive those funds, or from other organizations. And always put on there the amount of district funds that you expect to be requested. And again, the certification. We would like it to be signed and dated. And here again, the final report. If you do well on the progress report, you can really cut and paste a lot of it and just add to what you have instead of reinventing the wheel. And the impact of the project, and I think that's really important. How many non-Rotarians benefited? And what are the long-term benefits? As I said before, we hope that many of our projects will have long-lasting effects. And what was the role of any cooperating organization? Did they hold up their end? Or did you have to do something differently? Next part. And the funding and the expenditures. Again, that Excel sheet really comes in handy when it comes to doing your final report, because you'll have it right at hand. And the amount of district funds requested, that has to match the expenditures that you've done. Can't exceed, unless you have funds that have come in from other sources. But the amount of district funds requested can't exceed the amount that you initially requested. And the certification. And on this final report, it's very important that we have a signature and a date. And as the comment there, receipts sorted and labeled by budget category must be attached to the final report. We don't need them beforehand. It gets confusing when you send them in with a progress report, but they do have to come in with the final report so that we have everything. Okay, next slide. And there again, it's just the sample of what the sheet is. Very simple. Okay, next one. Next slide. Okay, questions? Or Rachel or Linda, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is in every grant, something changes through the year. And I know Pat deals with this so beautifully. But when you do your progress report, try to explain that in detail. What happened, what changed, and how did you solve the problem? And what will be the change you're expecting in the final report, so that the grant committee will be ready for that and know how to respond. Do you have any more detail about that, Pat? I know you deal with that so well.
Thank you, Rachel.
We do have one question in chat from Cindy Jeffers. How long does it take after we request additional funds before we hear something?
Is this for a project that is already going on, or?
Yes.
Okay. If we find out we have the extra funds, we can, you've already got the project approved. The turnaround would be very fast. I mean, it's already been approved by the Rotary Foundation. That's really what takes the most time. If the project's already been approved and you're working on it, and if we have additional funds, then we'll be glad to work with you. So the turnaround would be very fast. I don't know what you'd say. I don't know if there's a certain date, as long as the committee, you tell us what you need. And if we have the extra funds and nobody's asked for them, we'll be glad to work with you. So why don't we talk individually on that, if it's okay, and I'll be glad to talk to you some more about that.
David, we also have a question from Thomas Sterling that I'd like you to address in chat.
Sure. And let's see where that is.
Your last one.
Okay, the very last one. Okay, found out from David and the committee that North Knoxville is the first ever club to have expenditures with a debit card. Yeah, you might want to update things. That's right. I had never worked with anybody, because what we asked for canceled checks, we asked for good receipts, and we had just never had any expenditures that I remember that we had to use with a debit card. But it all worked out, and right now my mind's kind of a little bit blank on how we dealt with that. But
I think if we have the bank statements showing.
Well, yeah, you guys just, it was like all the receipts were there from the different vendors. And it was just like, well, it was to write a check at Lowe's is not the easiest thing in the world. So, it worked out fine.
It worked out fine. It was just that I just had never done it before. So it worked out fine. So you gave us a little something to work on, but it was good. We finally,
it is 2021, just to be clear, I mean, most people do not pay their bills with checks anymore, or some do, I know. And we're usually older, but
well, obviously you're the only person that was ahead of the game. We had never had that to happen before. So yeah, I mean, it worked out and we're okay with it, but just something that we had.
I just laughed when you told me our club was the first ever, which kind of, I have to tell you, when we pay our lunch bill now, I hand them the debit card because it's simpler. Not to be funny, but yeah. I'm the treasurer, fine. So yeah,
it worked out fine. So yeah,
hey, listen,
whatever you have, we'll work with you. And as long as we can prove you paid the bill with it, that's all we care about. And then we can prove it, that's all we need. So yeah, we've used bank statements. I've used transfers. When you're working with other countries, you use bank transfers. So the only thing the whole key to what we're trying to do is that we have to prove that the Rotary money was spent correctly, and we have receipts for it. So it matches up with the closing statement. That's the only thing that we're interested in. So it worked out great.
I just laughed because when you told me we're the first, it was like,
it was the first I remembered. I don't remember ever having done that before.
It was just funny. It was just funny.
Yeah, it was good though. Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you for sharing. I don't see any other questions, David, and I know that it's been a long meeting and we appreciate your attention. We do have one final poll to close the session. Greg, if you'll pull that up.
Deb, Can I add something?
Sorry, go ahead, Linda.
Last year, one of the clubs that I had to contact, I contacted the president, and this was a multi-club project, but the president didn't know that they had a grant. And, you know, I thought, what a wasted opportunity that was for that club to not know that they were part of a grant. And so I think when we're talking about grants and things, that we need to really talk them up in our meetings to make sure that everybody knows about them, because it's really, you know, really something important that we're doing, and that the whole club needs to know about it. And, you know, members have to miss for, you know, various reasons, sicknesses or having to travel with their job. And so, you know, during the year, just really talk it up, I think, because it's important.
That's a good point, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. Great point. All right, here comes our closing poll. Just one question this time. And again, it's a one-choice response, and I'm going to help you with it. Did this training begin your journey to a successful district grant? The first one says, yes, I know what to do. I know where I can find the forms I need, or I already have them. I know about the approval process and what I need to do during and post-grant in order to receive matching funds. I am pumped and ready. The second one is also yes. I understand the process and know what to do in general. The forms and contact info provided will help me with the details later, and you will be getting a contact page coming up next. Then the middle response is, I'm starting to see the light. The next one is still confused. And the last one, why did I even bother to attend? So if you would make your choice and submit your answers.
Yeah, we're at 88%, so pretty soon we'll be done here.
Great.
Everybody, 100%. Look at that. Wow.
Whoa. Well, look at this. We've got 39% who are ready to go and excited. We've got another pretty close to 50% that understand and know where to find the forms, and they'll get the details later. And we've got about 20% that are starting to see the light. Nobody's still totally confused, and nobody's sorry they came. So
That's good.
I think
I'm thankful for that. I wouldn't want anybody to waste their time.
Again, thank you all, and thank you to our wonderful presenters tonight for helping, and to you for being such a great audience, asking super questions and staying involved with us. On the next slide, Greg, sorry, the last slide was the contact information.
All right, hang on. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought we were done with slides. Sorry.
I did too. But I did promise to put that up. And you can always reach out to me or David in the emails that I sent out talking about this session. Both our contact information is there. But we'll close with this up. So there's David's cell and email, and there's Pat's cell and email as well, if you want to take a picture with your phone or something while we leave it up. Any last minute comments from our presenters?
You know, Debbie, I guess I just wanted to say thank you. Through the years, we've all been learning this whole grant process. It's still learning. Nobody knows everything about it. So we're all learning. The Rotary Foundation changes their rules sometimes. Sometimes we get a project and we have no idea whether it qualifies or not. So we send it to the Rotary Foundation. You know, it's something new that we're not familiar with. And then they approve it individually. But we have some great people that work in this district on grants, and a lot of great needs and communities. So I guess I just want to say thank you for all those people that have worked, all the clubs that have worked through this grant process. And there's always going to be something that comes up, but we're always willing to work it out. And that's what I think, that we have such a great organization. So I just wanted to say thank you.
David, I can't add to that. So I will say good night to all of you. And again, thank you for coming and we appreciate you. Reach out to us if you need us.